Where are the men? Where's the fathers? Where's an uncle? Where's an older brother, for Christ's sake? If she was going to a gym and being coached in boxing, where was the boxing coach who'd say, where'd you get, what's this? That's a handprint on your arm. Who the fuck put that? Or who sees her leave the boxing lesson and jump into a BMW with loud music playing and she's 15 years old. Where's she going? Who's picking her up? Nothing. Why? Absolute moral degeneracy, total moral bankruptcy, massive broad scale individualization, fracturing of family units, and alienation. Nobody's looking after each other.
And I need to speak English today. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Piero San Giorgio, author of many books. You'll have the links in the description. And I'm very, very happy in this last day of January, so I can wish Richard Happy New Year, to host Richard Grannon.
Happy New Year, sir. And I'm sorry that I'm forcing you to speak English. My French is terrible. Trust me, audience members, you'd rather the pain of us speaking English than hearing my French.
English is a fantastic language with one of the most precise and the best there is. Um, and we'll talk about why England isn't in these days with Richard. For those who may not know Richard Grannon, you are a psychologist, you are a world traveler, you have channels on YouTube and your website, which I will put in the description as well. I don't remember them because I go on them, they're in my bookmarks, and I'm subscribed to your channel, so I don't even remember what are the names, but I remember Richard Grannon Philosophy, of course. And you're also a host on many other podcasts around the internet in which you give, I must say, very, very insightful and smart thoughts on especially the psychological aspect of people, relationships, but also more and more about why the world is the way it is. And today I wanted to start with and I'm talking now, but I'll let you talk all of the show. On what has happened in the UK in the last decades, because for people who are not in Britain or not British, or even don't read so much or listen too much to British news, we are discovering that there has been gang rapes, grooming of small girls, young girls, for decades. Celebrities raping people in hospitals, things that are like from a really a very bad B movie or Z movie, uh, and reality beats fiction here. And we would like to understand what has happened, what is the process, basically, what's happening in the UK.
So, to sort of tie it in with what I do psychologically, so I focus on narcissistic abuse, and narcissistic personality disorder occurs when a person has experienced a type of trauma that unmoors them from reality, that disconnects them from reality. And in many ways, I think that's at the core of any issue that you could name around the United Kingdom, any one of the issues we're facing. At the core of it, there is an unmooring, a disconnecting from reality, and a choosing to take a fantasy over hard reality, whatever the subject is. Gender dynamics, the woke movement, the economy, the housing crisis, the NHS, everything is about making reality less important than fantasy. Fantasy is the important thing. Reality is a secondary priority to that. So everything that we see is fundamentally rooted in a sort of a narcissistic choice. Let's follow a fantasy that makes us feel good rather than pursuing a reality that gets good results in the real world.
Now, what we've seen is very much it from the outside, and having been many times in the UK, it seemed that there is something like class warfare in this, but not like the Marxists would say that the proletariat needs to take over the rich or the powerful. Here we see the powerful and the rich basically almost enjoying that fantasy while the proletarian classes, the poor, uh, more and more uneducated and completely crazy, in some cases with lots of drugs, lots of social problems, are
Mm-hmm.
being slaughtered in some cases, abused certainly, massively. And I wonder if there isn't some sort of class warfare going on there.
I think that there is. I mean, you cite Marx. Obviously, we've discussed Marx at length. I'm not a Marx fan, but in this case, I would like to see a kind of a Marxist evolution where you do have the lumpen proletariat turning on the elites, the real elites, not the bourgeoisie, but the real elites. And yes, there is a kind of a class warfare in terms of gaslighting. So the people who are in charge, the assumed adults in the room, have made a series of very poor, very greedy, very selfish, very psychopathic decisions that only served them, that were in defiance of the duty of care they had in the social contract to the people who they rule over. And they've done this time and again over the years, over the past few decades. They see each other doing this, and they see the person to the left of them, the person to the right of them is just ripping people off and just crushing people to extract as much money and power as they possibly can with absolute cruelty and disdain for the proletariat. And they think, well, I got to keep up, right? This is what my friends are doing. And there's just been this movement, which I think one of the things that I personally want to look at more over the next year, and one of the things I'm probably going to keep bringing up in this interview, is economics. Now, I'm not an economist, but when we're talking about this stuff, I think we have to bear in mind at all times that it's economics that show us what's really going on. There's loads of words, there's loads of narratives, there's loads of stories. They're horror stories, they're sci-fi stories, they're fantasy stories, and they keep people distracted. But the reality is by following the money. And there has been a massive extraction of wealth from the bottom of the pyramid up to the top of the pyramid. And that's undeniable. Nobody can deny that. And I think that's the real story behind everything here, a kind of an economic genocide, if you will.
So are you saying that while there is massive pillage, because at this point it's as you said, economic genocide
Mm.
on one hand, as a magician, you make a trick and you actually put ahead or you allow it to happen, and the Rotherham and the grooming gangs and the all the rapes and the uh, social unrest that you create, so that while you can do that, you take that and you do it with a good in good faith, because you live in a fantasy where you're actually doing the good because you're not racist, therefore you're a
Yeah.
good person.
As long as you're not racist,
You can
which
have people raped and killed, that's
that's
okay.
fine. That's fine. Well, I suppose the other way to look at it, if we turn it on its head, is to say, if it was me, I don't want a union of a majority white working class Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, and Chinese working class getting together, forming a union, and turning around to me and saying, "Hey, dickhead, never mind the future. We want some accountability for the last 20 years. What the fuck is this? What is this? What are you doing? We can see what you're doing." No, that's the last thing I want. So uh, I want them fighting amongst themselves. I want them
Yes.
turning on each other. And as you mentioned, it's a very, very complicated issue, especially at the moment, at this point in history in the UK. You do have this white working class revolt that is coming, that is building, that will come. I think me and you have both accepted there's no escaping this now. Um, but it's not clear sighted. I mean, these are people who drink a lot and they use a lot of drugs and they consume, they're drawing from their information from Twitter, they're drawing for their information from Instagram. This will be a powerful but not necessarily sharp revolution. These and God help anybody who stands in their way. I think it's going to be ferocious. I think it's going to
Yes,
be really awful. We'll be repeating the worst elements of history again.
I agree. I recently listened to your very nice, very fine interview of Tommy Robinson,
Oh,
in
thank
which,
you.
and I've been following him, and I will put the link to this one because I think it's really one of the best interviews of that there is in this context ever, because I've been following Mr. Robinson for since his beginning, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And of course, I've been following from apart, and I've seen his evolution. And in the recent interview you did, you see, I thought you allowed him to talk and show that he's fairly mature. That is not what the media portrays, like an anti-Muslim, violent, instigating civil war at all. On the contrary, he understood what you said, and I think this is the message that is dangerous for the elites: is that you would have working class people, most of them honest and decent, with their flaws. Who hasn't? Banding together and indeed saying, why have you been screwing us up for the last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? And
Yeah.
also now, why are you pitting us one against the other so that we slaughter each other instead of coming to ask accountability,
Yeah.
responsibility from your classes? Um, and I thought that interview was very good. And you have interviewed
Thank
also
you.
some imam.
Hmm.
Is it from Birmingham or certainly in the UK?
Liverpool, from my
Liverpool.
city, Adam. Yeah.
In Liverpool, who has also that kind of language. And while, don't let, I do think that immigration is a big problem for many, many reasons, but that's not the topic of today. However, I do agree that um, we have more to lose going one against the other, each other, than to actually join and try a modus operandi and actually try a way to, because we have a lot in common, among other things, being pillaged and mass genocided
Yeah.
by these
Yeah.
elites.
Yeah.
So the question, sorry for this rant, but the
It's okay.
question I wanted to lead to you to is, psychologically, why are these elites, besides the money, but money is not everything, because then where do you run with the money? Once there's blood and fire everywhere, unless you have an army
Mm.
of Terminators and Boston Dynamics killer hounds roaming the area. But what,
Mm.
you want to rule over a pile of ashes? You want to rule over a country that has been utterly destroyed and full of slaves? Now some people might think that, but even if you run away, this thing is going to follow you all, because it's global. This thing is starting to be global. It's not just UK. So what is the psychological thing? Is it short-sightedness? Is it madness? I know you're a specialist in narcissistic psychopathy, but is it that?
I think we're probably going to have to look again, as we did during the pandemic times, at a kind of mass psychosis. And normally we talk about mass psychosis amongst the target class, the ones who were targeted. But I think you can have a mass psychosis in the predatory class, because I agree with, I think, the stance you're coming from here, which is, okay, we are globalists. We want to rip out your cultural identity. You are not Irish. You are not French. You are not Italian. You are just a European mush. Also, you're white. So you're all guilty of colonialism and historical crimes. So feel bad. Take no pride. Okay, so you achieve that. You break the nuclear family. Okay, so population levels go down, and on and on and on. And I, like you, I'm going, okay, so 30 years in the future, France, Germany, Spain, UK looks like, what did I win? Like, now everything is slop. Everything has moved in this entropic direction towards just being slop. So I don't know. Like, you say things that are not politically correct. I'll just say it, and then you can edit it if you need to. What you would end up with in 50 years is countries of mixed people,
Mhm.
with no cultural identity, or whatever. They probably would have more of a corporate identity than a country based identity. Everybody would be very ethnically mixed. Now, I'm not a lunatic. I know we are all mixed. I know but you can't
Yeah,
artificially.
diversity is a strength, isn't it?
I mean, and
But
look,
there needs to be diversity for it to be a strength.
well, there has to actually be diversity for it to be a strength, exactly, and that's not what we're moving towards. It's
No,
it's it's a homogenized slop. And look, we have to put this in the interview. You have friends of all nations and
of
races. I
course,
have friends,
of
girlfriends.
course.
Neither of us.
Yeah, we fuck all the races.
Oh, fuck them all. It's beautiful. Everything is diversity is absolutely strength in the bedroom, and neither of us are denying that. But what when we're trying to think as I don't know, social engineers as the elites do, you think, why would I do that to a country? And I also want to say, um, I've traveled a lot around the world. Europe is a wonderful place. It's an amazing place, historically, geographically, culturally. We should be fighting tooth and nail eh, to preserve Italy, to preserve Germany, to preserve Spain. They're desperately trying to convince us these things are not worth fighting for. It's all shit. Your culture is, you don't have a culture and your history is garbage. This is just not true. This is not true. Everywhere in the world mimics France, mimics Italy, mimics Switzerland. Look at, I just lived in Dubai for a year. They are desperately trying to mimic the weather. They're even fucking up their own weather system. They're desperately trying to mimic the style. Everything that is European across the globe is considered as good. We should, as Europeans, should wake up from this trance and go, this is wonderful. What we have is the
Yes.
most precious jewel. I didn't even mention Greece. I mean, because when you start talking, you can't encapsulate the depth and the richness of our history. And it was diverse. I love the Balkans, you know
Yeah.
as well as that was very influenced by the Ottomans, and that's all integrated and created a new flavor. We That's diversity. That's diversity. Let Croatia be Croatia. Let Turkey be Turkey. That's diversity. It's the slop. It's the homogenous slop that we're moving towards. So that was a little bit of a rant talking about how much I love Europe. I get because
Yes.
I
Yes.
really do. I just I just spent a month in Prague, and I'm in Prague. I'm walking the streets and going, what history is here? What amazing kingdoms have risen and fall. Empires have risen and fallen here, too many to number. And so the point being, why would you want to knock all of that down, and what would be in its place? And you say, you rightly said, it can't just be financial because, well, apart from anything else, we live in an age where you can just make money. You just go diddly dee into a machine and you make money. So is it therefore born of resentment? Is it born of hatred? Is it evil? To me, at this point, I look at it and I go, you must be evil. Because
Yes.
if a people spend, any people, let's go Greece, because we have so much here that we can choose from. And they spend thousands of years building a culture, and all you want to do is stamp it flat into dust and knock it back into history. What? Like, if we imagine if we as whites went to, I don't know, went over South America and found every single Mayan temple and said all of this is trash. You know why? Because you murdered kids, you killed people who were weaker than you. You are the most racist colonizers. You don't smash it down. We do everything we can to preserve it because for all the horror.
That's the point of the British Museum.
Right. And also our culture is built on theft. And you just please accept our culture. We love to steal. so even this idea that because a nation or a culture, or you can mention the Zulus, you can mention Japanese
Yes.
samurai, full of torture, full of genocide, full of
Yes.
colonialism, but we don't destroy it. We go, well, obviously the horrifying things were horrible, but you don't go from truth number one, killing babies is wrong. Yeah, okay, we're not stupid. Equals truth number two, smash it all down. No, that's evil. That's absolutely evil. That is history. It happened. We might not like it. It might make us feel icky, but it happened, and we should do everything within our power to preserve it. So, to answer your question, I can only presume they're in the grip of some weird mass psychosis
Hmm.
where either they're in a fantasy where they genuinely believe that the world would be better if it was homogenized slop, or they know it wouldn't be, but they're doing it anyway. But all I can judge them on is their actions. That's all I can do.
Now, as a psychologist, you probably have seen, or sometimes we all do that. We know that something we do is wrong, cigarette, overeating, whatever. We know it. We know it's bad for us, and yet we continue to do it. Is
Yeah.
there, is, could that be mass? It works for an individual. Could that become a culture in a mass psychosis point of view in this kind of elites?
We Then we could be exploring some very dark territory that I don't fully understand. Let's You and I are perfectly comfortable to pontificate on subjects that we're not experts in. So let's do that. Let's do that.
Sure.
Let's say imagine you and I were just sat in a cafe together. I would just go there with you. I wonder maybe. If at a biological genetic level, any population of animals within this ecosystem knows at a deeper unconscious level if there's too many of them, or if they're extracting too much from the environment, and then their mating drive goes down, or they start engaging in weird behaviors that are not going to cause the species to proliferate, because ultimately for us to survive, if we had a choice between 10 million of us but we all die, or only 1,000 of us, but the 1,000 survive, the genetic choice will be the minority population, because we don't really matter. We think all of our psychology is individualistic and we think we matter, but we're in the Dawkins model, we're just a sock to throw into the future full of genes. That's it. We're just a sock full of genes. Just go, there's your DNA. Fling it as far into the future as you can is the probably the deepest, strongest drive that we have. And so I do wonder, is there some darker psychology, evolutionary psychology at play that is actually self-destructive?
You probably have heard or read the work of ethologist John Calhoun about the experiences with rats and the experience called the behavioral sink.
Yes, yes, I have. Yeah. Is
What
he the
you
Rat
describe is
City
very
guy?
similar to that. Sorry?
Did he create Rat City? Well,
Yes.
okay.
He made several dozens of them,
Yeah.
and with different kind of setups with unlimited resources or limited resources and unlimited space. And the unlimited space, unlimited resources was the most disastrous one, where you have this completely ripping off of society, up of the mouse society, up to the point where it goes so much beyond the mouse have culture, their own instinctive culture, and it
Yeah.
drops and population decreases to zero.
Yeah.
And in every scenario where that was attempted, when there is exponential growth and unlimited resources and unlimited space, it eventually collapses to zero.
Yes.
So, as I write in my books, we're not mice. I mean, like, besides politicians, we're not rats. But so therefore we can learn and we can tune a bit. But right now, I think your that theory is pretty solid. What you've described.
It's it's such a shame, because I think one of the indicators that it could be the right thing is we're having this conversation now, and we know in our bodies and we know unconsciously this is dangerous. And what's the danger? That I basically say, at a macro level, if okay, so if I say to you, Piero, I want what's best for me, I want to be healthy. C'est bon. I want what's best for my children, for my wife, for my family. I want to make money and build a big house for them. All good. For our extended family, I want what's best. Okay, pas de problème. Then if I say I want my nation to do well, ah, wait a second. Then we hit this invisible tripwire where everybody in the room goes quiet and the needle scratches, and they're like, "What? So you are a Nazi?"
Well, I guess everyone before 1970 was, because in that case, because the all the nation of the world ever, or since even in the declining phases of their own, I mean, think of Rome declining. You still had a general who was trying to, okay, make Rome great again. Didn't work, as it
Yeah,
cannot work usually, these kind of things, because when
yeah,
it's past a certain level, my reference is actually intended to current events. But and I wish them good luck, but I think it won't work. However, because too late, too little, too late. But I applaud it if it would work, and I hope it would
yeah,
work. You have this um, how would you say trends. You have these long-term trends that built up over time, and we
yeah,
used to have Britain, king and country first. In France was vive la nation, and so on. Even
yeah,
countries who were like out of the slums would say Italia. you know just do
yeah.
just do cook good food and host tourists. Don't try to invade Africa, come on. Everyone tried, and everyone tried to put the ambitions of the country above
Yeah,
the ambitions of the individual. I wrote a novel about my grandfather who was in this, you know, proletariat guy who say, okay, now we're at war with Greece, and say, why? I like Greece. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, now you have to do Greece, and they say, no, you're not. Now we're at war with Germany. Why?
Yeah.
They used to be with our friends. Now they're enemies. Okay, you go to work in a factory in Germany now because you're prisoner, and
Yeah.
now the Russians are here and they save you. And but didn't we weren't we at war with the Russians? You know, these kind of
Yeah.
absurdities for the little guy being part of the big history, and and for sure we went too far in nationalism, in conquest. China still is resentful to us for that. We fucked
Yeah.
them up completely,
Yeah. Yeah.
including
Yeah.
Italians. We went there, and the Britain and the French and the German and the Austrians. We saw Chinese very rich, very
Yeah.
weak. We went them like, oh,
Yeah.
and um, and we learned not to do this anymore. And now it's been used against us, and it's very strange.
Well, that's an interesting thing. I think where I stand on that is yes, it absolutely is being used against us, but it can't be used against you if you don't feel it. So, let's say white guilt or European guilt.
Yeah, I
Uh,
don't feel it.
uh, Me personally, I don't. I,
White privilege. Oh, I see it everywhere.
I mean,
I don't feel guilt.
and it's a source of good comedy and banter with my friends. So in Prague, I have friends there who there's a lot of Black Americans who live there, and they always play this game with me. They're like, "Shut up, colonizer! You don't know," because they're playing, and I feel nothing about any of this. I'm like,
Yeah.
so in terms of psychological manipulation, if I want to guilt trip you into do something, it's not Nosferatu. I'm not firing lasers into your mind. I find a vulnerability that is already there. And I agree with you. I think when you look historically, we've collectively gone, God, so we're right here in history. And what's the most recent history that our grandparents, as you just said, you wrote a novel about your grandfather? Well, it was them, the European people doing stuff that wasn't so nice. And it
Hmm.
was bad. And I absolutely agree it was bad. But then, as I said before, that truth one does not jump to truth two in me. I don't feel bad. I wasn't there. If I
I
was
wasn't there
there,
either.
if I was there, I would have said, "Hey, could you not steal people's stuff, please?" I would like to believe. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would have been at the vanguard of it and saying, "Let's steal it all."
Yeah, but that's not the point. We weren't there.
That's not the point. We weren't there. We weren't there, and I
Maybe
don't. I don't buy this uh, the sins of the father have to be carried by the son nonsense.
nonsense.
I, I am, my first experience in the Balkans was Bosnia. My friends were all from Sarajevo, and they introduced me to their parents and their grandparents who fought during the siege.
Of course.
And then there are hideous things that happened. There was on all sides. I
Yeah.
acknowledge it. I wouldn't dream of meeting a Serb who's 25 years old now and saying, "Oh, you Serb, well, your uncle, it's only 20 years ago. 25 years ago. Where were they during the attempted genocide?" I can't. I think that's monstrous. I
Yeah.
think that is absolute. And if you look the period of time and the ethnic issue, that's white on white. That's much more recent. And I'm saying absolutely not. I'm not playing that game. I wouldn't say that to somebody from who'd been involved, whose parents were involved in Rwanda. I don't hold it. If your father did something during the genocide, of course that's terrible, but I'm not holding you accountable for it. That's recent history. I find this for me it's so frustrating because it's so obvious. I just
Yeah.
think no, you can't do this to people. It's not right.
4 days ago, I have to be careful with my words here, but 4 days ago, in a small country in the Middle East, they were celebrating, and understandably, that 80 years ago precisely, there was liberated one of the camps where their people suffered. Let's put it this way. I'm going to use not neutral words. And at the same time, and by the way, and it's good to celebrate things that happen to your people, your nation, and we probably will celebrate in 100 years what happened in the UK. Not celebrate in a good way, like commemorate
Commemorate,
that
yeah.
the crazy stuff that happened in the early 2000s and late 1990s in the UK and elsewhere in Europe. and hopefully we'll have reconciliation on these things. But there was two shameful aspects of it. I'll take both sides as shameful to be fair, and because I really believe so. There was a politician in the country where these camps are, with unpronounceable name, the politician, who basically said, "Yeah, we shouldn't commemorate this because now that little country in the Middle East is doing the same thing to other people." Not related, in my opinion. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
you can disagree with what that little country does to people that they have in their own camps,
Yes.
but that doesn't take away the suffering of their ancestors in those camps, of which I don't feel guilty at all because it's interesting in an historical point of view. But I wasn't
Yes.
there. My
Yeah. Yeah.
grandfather was not far, but he didn't do anything.
Yes.
And my other grandparents were having pasta in Italy somewhere. So we were not related. On the other side, people say people who criticize what our country is doing now and comparing it to what people doing what and we can do what we want because of what happened 80 years ago.
Yeah.
Also shameful because it's also not related. So
Yeah.
to some point there is the scoundreling way of humans to try to do stuff and take advantage to justify whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
But at some point, we do have ethics. I mean, we're supposed to have, as humans, develop ethics because we have a brain. We're not just instinct and
Yeah.
eat, fuck, and shit. We have more than that in life
Yeah.
normally, and so we have to think and we have to be strong. And I have further questions, but maybe I wonder what you think of maybe this the solution because for a lot of small individuals like us seem overwhelmed. We have prime ministers who insult us. We have um, paid by government NGOs that insult us, and but we have an incredible power, and an incredible power that they can't do much, which was already talked about at the end of 1984, the novel by George Orwell, is that we can say no.
Yes.
Whatever the consequences, we can say no to that bullshit. We can say no to
Yes.
their tyranny. We can, like slaves of the past, we can go away. We can refuse to work. We can say just no. No, we will
Yes.
not accept. And there is something, and there is something further that I want to comment, and then I'll leave it to you to answer these many topics I brought up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, you know how. Um,
Let me drink more coffee.
yeah, and I
I'll
finally
hold it.
I had Armagnac instead of tea this morning. So
Nice.
what the hell? The the element of well, actually, no, let's stop now and let you answer, and it will come back. I almost forgot my thought. So,
Okay.
you think we can say no? Is it realistic, or is it
I,
childish thought?
it's not a childish thought. Piero, they're going to. Like it's coming. It's imminent. There will be a big no, because how do I put this? Uh, why did my generation not say no, or the generation before me? It was shitty. People were wage slaves, but you can have a house, you can have a wife, you can have kids, as long as you pay these ridiculous taxes for things that you don't want to have happen, which is an outrage. But okay, you can go to the pub on the weekends and get pissed. You can smoke. If you can find drugs, you can take them. Once a year, you can go on a holiday to Spain, blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. Now what? Now they can't even do that. It's like this huge slave plantation. I know money is some sort of internal currency. It's beads, little glass beads, and it only has value when it's exchanged between the slaves. It's not attached to anything. So we're slaves in the plantation, and you go, look, it sucks, right? It sucks. We do 9 hours of picking crops all day, but at nighttime we can dance and we can tell stories and we can remember the good times. We can tell our myths. You go watch the movies, you go watch TV, you check out, you read a book. Yeah, okay, that's good, isn't it? Yeah. And on Saturday, they give us a little bit of chicken. And then on Sunday, we get whatever. Okay, so on and so forth. Like prison. The prison runs Taco Tuesdays. Don't stab the other guy to death because you're going to have a taco tomorrow. And that's how small the plantation becomes. Then they said, no chicken, no beef, no dancing. Dancing, not 2 hours, now 15 minutes. And also, we're going to make it so that some of you that
Extra
dance,
whipping.
extra whipping for
Extra
dancing.
whipping.
Yeah. So no more pleasure, more punishment. It's not an 8 hour day, it's a 12 hour day, and on and on. And you keep turning this torture device, the thumb screw. Well, that's very painful when I have a thumb. But if you go all the way through my thumb and cut it off, keep turning. There's no fucking oh, we're gonna do it more. It's like the thumb's gone, dude. You can't punish me anymore. So now what we're seeing in the UK, there was recent research that came out that said the youngest people, Gen Z, they're swinging right, but they're looking at dictatorships. Some of them,
Yeah.
Germany is swinging right.
But
France in
even
certain pockets.
the left are also dictatorship. Let's
Yeah,
not forget
exactly.
that.
Exactly. It is a dictatorship. So maybe then it's like this primitive realism where you say, well, we're going to live in a dictatorship. Let's do this. I mean, I made that cynical decision after the pandemic. I went to live in Dubai and people said it's an Islamic theocracy. Are you okay with that? I said yes. As long as
Yeah.
as long as I'm left to live as I want to live. It was a deeply cynical move, and after a year I didn't like it. But I said, yeah, I live in an Islamic theocracy. If it works, if it's functioning, this is breaking, it's not functioning. So when you say, will there be a no? I don't even know whether it will be this individualistic triumph of the will. Enough is enough. And now we shall say no. I think they'll just go, well, what else is there? And this is back to the psychology. Narcissistic psychopaths tend to overplay their own hand. So the self-destruction is built into the personality disorder, and they tend to behave in a way that eventually they are revealed and eventually they are destroyed for what they are. And I wonder if there's an element of that there. Because if you and I were evil and we were running the United Kingdom, you would give them chicken on Saturdays. You would let them smoke. You would let them dance. And you'd say, look, dude, we need to let them release a little bit of steam. So you say, look, guys, extra chicken on Saturday. Also, the working day is an hour longer. Just a little more pleasure here, but a little twist of okay, you can live like that. You can do another 10 years like that. But what Keir Starmer is doing, everything that gives pleasure, take it away. Everything that is stressful, dial it up. And I'm like, do you want revolution? Because that's at this point now, I don't see Keir Starmer as my enemy. I think he's an
So
accelerationist. I'm like, go ahead, do it more.
yeah, yeah,
Go
yeah.
on, let's see where this goes.
I would not bet on his longevity though, but yeah, I mean, I don't see these people as my. I don't have hate. I mean,
Yeah,
we have the same in Switzerland, but 20 years behind or 30
yeah,
years behind in lacking in time. But here's the question. It seems to me that these elites, these people who do that, and a lot of them we don't know about because they are in a bit in the shade, they are behind. The people we see, they're the front runners of the thing.
yes, yes,
It seems to me that they need our agreement to do what they're doing to us. It seems to me that there's a unwritten rule, unspoken rule that they need our consentment to do the evil things they need to do to us, and
yes,
that they're a bit stuck because if we say no, they can use physical force against us, but they don't have the pleasure of us agreeing to the pain we're going to suffer. Isn't that
yes.
a psychological? Because I don't go into supernatural. I don't go into superstitious. But isn't there a psychological mechanism that says that people who do evil, they actually, or the narcissistic abuse people, they want to have the agreement of the victim?
I think it's interesting you say you don't go into the supernatural. So in the world of conspiracy theory, I'm sure you know there'll be people who say, well, the Illuminati or whoever it is, uh, within the rules of magic, the black magic they're practicing, they need your consent. And I say, okay, I'll take that metaphorically. I'll take it as it's neither directly true nor directly false. But as you rightly said, in terms of so I don't take vampires as literally true,
Mm.
but vampire stories often require consent. Not all, but many myths. You're
Yeah.
supposed to invite the vampire in because it's the interaction with the shadow. What tempted you? Was it lust? Was it your rage? Was it your jealousy? You had
Faust.
This Faustian deal. Um, and in this case, also there is a one more thing I wanted to add is there is a practical issue, which is yes, you can use violence, But again, if we role play as the leaders of a dictatorship, you and I, we'd figure out very quickly there's not you can, but the proletariat are just being battered with sticks by other members of the proletariat.
Of
Just
course.
because you put a hat on, he's not a different species. She's not a different species. And eventually, if that goes on long enough and you keep beating people, the police will just and the army would just because they are proletariat, they are
Yes.
working class. And we know from revolutions in the past, it runs out of it eats itself. What was the Cambodia movement called? Was it
The
Khmer
Khmer
Rouge?
Rouge.
Khmer Rouge. It just ate itself in the end. So you can use some pleasure, you can use some pain, but you really do need consent. I mean, the UK is 66 million people. How many police are there? How many army are there? Yeah, we can beat a few
100,000.
of them. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've got to have consent. You do have to have consent. And yes, it is part of the narcissistic, psychopathic shared fantasy space. You are agreeing to this. You're agreeing to have this happen because the fantasy it makes sense to you. There's a fantasy payoff in order for this to work this way.
Now, you published online a great conference that I commend everyone to look, which was about why are we ruled by narcissistic psychopaths? And indeed, the question is yet is simple. It is fantastic because you have the psychopaths in society. You have that 5%, whatever percent, and we saw them in the companies we worked in, CEOs and so on. And part of it is the drive that pushes them to go on the top. However, there are in societies clearly in the history we've had leaders who are not psychopaths, great leaders, great. Sometimes they're ruthless, for sure, but not necessarily psychopaths. Now it seems that everywhere you go, whether it's in business, whether it's in, of course, governments, and the elites behind those people, we see ruthless, psychopaths, narcissistic. I think of Macron in France, very narcissistic, but or Trudeau in Canada, but at the same time, cruel and this and it's like all of them in the West. I go to China, I see ruthless leaders. I go to Russia, I was in Russia recently, again I see ruthless, cold minded leaders, but not psychopaths. And I wonder what was the special receipt, what made them all float up to leading so fast in the last 30 years? Because this is a very fast process. I think it's a symptom of an imminent collapse, but societies have collapsed in the past without that. So I wonder what makes this special.
It's a really interesting question. And I don't have a finite answer. I agree with you that there's been an acceleration of mediocrity, mediocre psychopaths, mediocre narcissists, weak-willed, spineless, and yet cruel, uh, lacking in vision, but also highly manipulative. And so it's like we're being ruled by a lower quality of psychopaths than we saw in the 1940s and
Yeah, give us
1950s.
Stalin, give us Stalin back.
That's a real man. Give us a real man back. Um, and so yeah, I hear you on that. And I suppose on one level, the sanest answer I could give is the leaders are always going to reflect where the culture is up to. So you said it's not the same all over the globe. What we have in Russia and China is different to what we have in Canada and let's say France or the UK. So if the culture becomes vain and silly and narcissistic, Justin Trudeau is a vain and silly little man who's led a very privileged life. And there is no decision he's ever made that I've observed or a word he's spoken in public that doesn't reflect what a spoiled little twat he is. He's awful, awful. You mentioned Macron. Yeah, we've got Keir Starmer
Same.
now. Boris Johnson. These are not great men. And you're not being led off the abyss by a great man who's just got a twisted vision. You're being led into the abyss by some silly little twerp who shouldn't be there, but we, as the demos of the
Yeah.
democracy, must take accountability. It's not your will, it's not Richard's will, but it is the will of the people. And Justin Trudeau reflects the narcissistic wish fulfillment wank fantasy of a majority of Canadians, unless we're going to go into the conspiracy theory that he was placed there. And I don't believe that. I believe he was voted in genuinely. And I've seen the comments under his videos. People love him. Why do they love him? They can only love him because they're blind to their own privilege, their own naivety, their own lack of experience in the real world. And he just makes them feel good. There he is, such a good man, silent voice, just like me. All of his virtue signaling and all of the shit he comes out with, it must reflect the will of the people. Otherwise, you're not voted in. People are upset about Trump now. I would just say that was the will of the American people. I don't see a conspiracy there. I think you've got to look at where the collective consciousness is moving, and that's where it's gone to, and that's what it is. So there is an element of that there. Like the people put these leaders in place for sure.
So maybe you'll explain. Now, I write a lot of novels and short stories, which I don't think are good enough to be published, and they are stored for maybe being rewritten some point or never. Two of them, I want to submit the plot to you, and you tell me why that they never happened in real. First,
Okay.
you have tens of thousands of young girls being groomed, rape gangs, forced into prostitution in the UK from lower classes, let's say the working classes of the lumpen proletariat classes in the UK. Now, out of those thousands of girls, there must be a father or an uncle of these girls or a cousin who was an SAS, who was a tough fighting guy who learned about it. Now, as far as we know, and that's the story I have, none of them put a group of friends and went on a smart rampage to eliminate, take revenge, not necessarily on the grooming gangs per se, but on the judges, the police heads, the politicians who created the environment for this. Now, am I putting too much intelligence or too much creativity into this kind of people? That's my first novel. So I let you answer. Why is this not happening? And I'm not wishing for it. I'm for peace, love, and lots of kisses. But why do you think this didn't happen? I mean, it's exactly those classes. I mean, the SAS, they don't come from, I mean, you have some rough, tough guys who've done in the army, some veterans, the guys from the Falklands. They're not all from the posh upper
Oh
classes.
no. I
So
think
why not?
like we know so SAS you would typically but not always be recruited from an infantry regiment. And the infantry regiments are filled up with lads from Liverpool, from
Yeah.
Newcastle, from Glasgow. Yeah, and they're looking for guys who are rough and tough. Why
Yeah.
hasn't this happened? Okay, so I'm going to answer the question and let this is a big landmine. I'm just going to stand on it. Um, you know, I'm not a right wing populist. I'm right on some issues, I'm left on some, I'm centrist on some issues. But I think we need to start telling the truth and the whole truth about this story. Where and when was it taking place, and what was the context? So let's have it right. What these men did was illegal, it was vile, they should be punished. What the police did and the councillors around them in their terror of being called racist was cowardly and awful, and they deserve to be punished. You said, where were the men protecting them? That's an interesting question, Piero. So, in our fantasy, in the book, because I love to hit reality through fantasy, I think it's an excellent strategy. I love playing this game. So, in your book, you imagine, as Hollywood would have us imagine, that there are good, wholesome fathers out there. In some estate up in Rotherham, there's a white man going to work. He works in a factory. He did his time in the Queen's Lancashire Regiment, and then he was in the SAS. He doesn't want any trouble, but if you give him trouble, he's going to come for you. Doesn't exist. Not there.
Mm.
Not there. What families were these girls coming from then? Am I now engaged in victim blaming? No. What I'm saying is, let's have it right. There's been a culture of degeneracy, of absolute fucking wanton moral degeneracy that's been running rampant in the UK for decades. It is very normal here for people to get drunk out of their minds on the weekends, take drugs, get into fights, and they fill the accident and emergency departments that we pay for through our socialist policies. And we all just accept it. We all just accept that that's a normal part of the culture. In these towns, like I'm not from Rotherham, but I'm from the north. I know what they're living with. I know what conditions they're living in. These are lost kids. These were fatherless, parentless kids who are being raised by the streets. I'd also say to people, I did 5 years in the British education system. Around the time that this was happening, I worked with kids like this. Usually I'd work with kids from the age of 12 to 18. And look, I've already established what happened to them was an absolute crime. They're guiltless. But what was the context? You asked me a question, and I would say the context that you're offering simply doesn't exist. Where are the men? Where's the fathers? Where's an uncle? Where's an older brother, for Christ's sake? If she was going to a gym and being coached in boxing, where was the boxing coach who'd say, where'd you get, what's this? That's a handprint on your arm. Who the fuck put that? Or who sees her leave the boxing lesson and jump into a BMW with loud music playing and she's 15 years old. Where's she going? Who's picking her up? Nothing. Why? Absolute moral degeneracy, total moral bankruptcy, massive broad scale individualization, fracturing of family units, and alienation. Nobody's looking after each other. Nobody's taking care of each other. You'll only find that within the ethnic minority cells. So the Chinese will take care of the Chinese, the Muslims largely will look after Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and so on. But white people aren't taking care of each other. They've drunk some suicidal brew of hyper competitiveness and individualism that just cuts them off. And as long as they're, you know, look, white people are up in arms about this, and I get it. I understand it. It's awful what's happened. But where were you? Where were the brothers? Where were the aunties? Where was the family? How do you see a girl jump into a fucking BMW with a 22-year-old, a 40? There's no reason why a 14-year-old is leaving school and jumping into a BMW with a 25-year-old man. Then he goes and he gives her alcohol and he gives her drugs, and then they have sex. Absolutely, it's grooming. It's totally illegal. I'm not saying that, but the responsibility needs to be looked at properly. And I think it's really interesting what you've presented. And my answer to your question at the beginning of this would be, there is no men. There is no man. Nobody's coming to save those girls because there's no men there. There's no men there to save them.
And that's why it's not published. Second novel. Yeah, unfortunately. Second novel I was toying with, second short story, variant of that novel.
Yeah.
There's a new king taking over the country. He's the head of state. He's actually the owner of the fucking country. If you look
Yeah.
at legal status, with some exceptions, but he's the owner of the stuff. He clearly cannot have this go on in his country. He cannot stand these elites that are fucking up everything. So he summons his friends from the army and the special forces. And he sets up a coup d'etat, not against himself, but against this filthy democracy that has destroyed the empire. That's his mother who did that, but now
Yeah.
has destroyed his own country and created a third world situation is in his own country. And he leads the army and with his battle uniform on top of the whatever armored car still exists, because
Yeah.
they're all went to Ukraine, leads the army across the country to purge manu military, the elites and the shit out of the system, and restores proper ethical and moral justice in the country. It's also unpublished. What are
It
the
sounds
odds that this happens?
sounds like a pornographic fantasy to me. I think it's wonderful. Please write it and publish it. I'd love to read that. Um, I Now that one's got more potential to it. That one's got more potential to it. The only thing I think that has stopped that is how should I put this? We're all swimming in the same soup, to mix the metaphors. So all of us, myself included, our will has been worn down slowly, slowly through multiple means, through advertising, through marketing, through political propaganda. And, the motto of the SAS is who dares wins. None of us dare do anything. There's no daring left. There's no defiant will. You must have a will to do that. And there isn't a very strong one. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. Military guys generally, and special forces guys particularly, are selected by not just by their capability, but by their obedience. These are dutiful men that their sense of honor may not be your sense of honor, my sense of, but they have one, have a duty, and they need to receive the order top down. Special forces guys will say, "Oh no, when I was trained, we were trained to think individualistically." I would say, "Yes, I know that, but you still needed somebody to give you the mission so that you could think individualistically." So the only thing stopping that scenario, which is a potential scenario, is one leader. And that leader doesn't need to be ex-military. He just needs to, like as Hitler did with the German people, he hit the pain points of the German people again and again and again. Very clever. I'm not saying good, but clever, manipulative man. And if they can rally around him, they need someone to rally around, which I think is a military term, to rally around the leader. They need that Napoleon. They need that person to say, okay, he's the leader. He says what we're going to do. What's the mission, sir? And then we go. And once you have that person activated, it only takes one person. You could have that. You could have that kind of a rebellion. Um, I think things would have to get considerably worse in the UK than they are now, because right now people are still worried about being caught on camera, being filmed, being imprisoned. But as the social contract is slowly torn up more and more, month by month, yeah, they'll hit a point where again, it's the example I gave before. You can torture me until I have no thumb, and then what? I can't feed my kids. I can't pay rent. What are you asking me? What do you want? Keep doing as you're told. Fuck you. No, I'm not going to. For what? For what? There's no payoff. So yeah, once we get there, yes, that I think that's actually likely. And I just want to make clear to everybody listening, the only way I would become the dictator you're all looking for is if there was a full-scale military revolution. And then you have to point a gun at me and say, now you take control. And I'll go, oh, I don't want to. Oh, okay then.
Yeah, yeah. No, Richard Grannon, thank you very much. I will put the links to your channels and your book. I commend people to read your book and soon maybe other books, and certainly check out your training courses and your lessons. How you call them, master classes
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah.
on psychology, on relationships. You have a lot of topics that are really interesting. And I'm not even sure I can actually go to the UK. I've been refused a visa to the US, but who knows? Maybe we will meet in other countries.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would like that. I'd like that very much. I'd love to meet up with you again. Thank you
It was
for
a great
interviewing me.
conversation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.